those weren't my interests as much. I had a very ideological reason for starting YukYuks back in the mid-70s.
Do tell us.
Well, I mean, obviously I always loved laughter, and I always loved making people laugh, and I always loved being around people who made people laugh. But I also had kind of a vaguely social-political reason for doing this club, and it was to kind of act as a sounding block, as a place where people could develop kind of antisocial ideas, libertarian forum. One of the things YukYuks did before anybody, and I still think that nobody else does it, is we do comedy, but we left the sex and the anger in.
Right.
And that was radical in 1978, and it's radical now in Canada. Not so much in the United States, but in Canada, that's still a radical thing to do. So you'd come to YukYuks, and the comics would be kind of mean-spirited, because that's the world that they felt they were living in. They were cranky. They were kvetchy, as the Jewish word goes. Big, kvetchy people.
I was an amateur, actually. I tried the stage when John Wing was the host
right.
of
and
Amateur
he's prickly,
Nights.
Isn't he?
He very much was. And there were sayings that I would get from some of the other guys. Kenny Robinson was also an amateur then, trying out his work. I was amongst that. I remember him being one of the guys backstage doing the amateur night and learning from these guys how comedy isn't pretty.
No, Steve Martin said that comedy is not pretty. That's Steve Martin's line. The comics, and we can get into the psychological, makeup of what the comics are and what kind of person becomes a comic.
Outsiders.
Yeah, they're outsiders. That's right. They're outsiders. They're even outsiders as outsiders. So they're not even people who are outsiders and that are attracted to, say, political activism, because even that's too much of an insider. They're people who sit around and bitch about activists the same they would bitch about the system. Everything's wrong, or as Groucho Marx first put it in Duck Soup in 1934, whatever it is, I'm against it. And that is the essence, the quintessential essence of what comedy is and stand-up comedy is and modern stand-up comedy is. So this is what I wanted to do at the ripe old age of 24 when I started this. There's a Canadian tradition in comedy which is very much externalized stuff. You make fun of the Queen, you make fun of politicians, you make fun of governments. But that isn't what we wanted to do at all. I was taking my cues from, New York Jews like Lenny Bruce and Woody Allen, and very interested in what happens internally. And people were doing at YukYuks kind of psychological comedy about themselves, putting themselves down, putting people in the room down, putting down the way people dress, the way people act, the way people make choices. So it was very different and a real radical break from what Canadian comedy had been up until that point. And the only other vaguely modern kind of comedy in Canada at that point was Second City, which had opened up about 4 years before us. But even that wasn't what we felt was really valid. We felt that was too watered down. For instance, everybody on the Second City stage at the time, and even now, was white, lily white. Everybody looked like they came from Oakville. Everything was white collar. They were white collar concerns and white collar ideas and white collar issues, and people spoke like they were white collar. The people at YukYuks, even in 1976, were multicultural across the board. We had Italians, comics. We had East Indian comics, Jewish comics, Greek comics. That's what black comics.
Any Armenians?
I don't know. Maybe some closet Armenians.
Closet Armenians.
That means their name would have to end in IAN, right?
That's right, baby. That's right.
I don't know. Breslinian. Almost. I'm almost Armenian.
I'll sit on your lap. I'll make you an honorary Armenian. How's that?
Yeah,
thank you.
This was the beginning of the forum for people like Andrew Dice Clay.
Yeah, although he comes in after that. I was the first person to ever put Andrew Dice Clay on network television in the United States on the Joan Rivers show, and I said, Andrew, you got to do this material, not that material, because if you use that material, I'll lose my job. And I'm the only guy taking a chance on you, so please, I'm rolling the dice on you, no pun intended. Mm-hmm. Don't dishonor me. And you know what? He did a beautiful job. He did all his impressions. He did his safer stuff, and it was a great shot. And we became friends, and all through all his controversies, I was still his friend.
Now, how did you attract these comedians to this kind of comedy at YukYuks?
Well,
I mean, how do they know enough to come with their, curmudgeonly material, come to YukYuks?
It's funny how, people find each other. It's just funny how people find each other. There must have been a need. There must have been a need for people to find this kind of thing, because They showed up. I mean, it started originally with a core group of about 12 people. Those 12 people were people I found at Harborfront because I was part of the first team in 1974 to develop the Harborfront project down by the lake. I was given a budget to book all kinds of acts, musicians, children's performers, dance groups, bands, and comics. And I worked with a guy then named Don Cullen who ran a thing called the Bohemian Embassy, which was a resurrected coffee house from the 60s that they put into Harborfront. And we had a comedy night, and I hosted the comedy night a lot. So I met all these comics, and there was a clear break between what those comics were doing and the comics were doing just 5 years before or 3 years before. It was one of those moments like, 1956, and all of a sudden, white people were playing rhythm and blues, and rock and roll was born. And the same thing happened here in Toronto around 1976, 1974. There was a sea change, a paradigm shift, and people started doing a totally different personalized comedy that had not been done before. And you can say that what was happening was that those kids that were raised in the 60s, that came of age in the 60s, growing up on sex and drugs and rock and roll and rebellion and all the rest of it, finally were old enough to take the stage and talk about that stuff that was happening to them. So there was a real generation gap. When I opened up the first real club in 1978 in Yorkville, there was a tremendous amount of publicity. The kind of publicity, I've never seen anything get that kind of publicity since, frankly. I was on the cover of every magazine, every newspaper, the television cameras, the radio people were down every single night just trying to figure out this phenomenon because there was clearly an audience there that had never been there before. This was not the audience that went to the theater. This was a new audience.
To the